I think a useful starting point is maybe to recognize that behavioral economics as a discipline is something that's very new. It's only really existed for the last decade. So even though the starting point was in the 70s where Amos Tversky and Danny Kahneman were doing initial research around this, it was only really in around 2008 that you saw Richard Thaler produce the book Nudge, and a few of the initial nudge units created in around 2010. That it was then kind of taken from the realm of academia into more of an applied sense. But despite the fact that it's such a new discipline, it's something that's gained traction incredibly quickly. What you see now is that many governments across the world have their own nudge units, and they're using it to improve both policies and services.
Do we have one? Does South Africa have a nudge unit?
There is some work that's been taking place in the Western Cape, but we don't currently have a nudge unit that sits within government. You do see bits and pieces of work happening within the South African government, though, but no sort of internal units. What you also see is kind of an increase in more and more businesses are applying behavioral economics to their own business strategy. And I think there's probably kind of three main reasons for this. I'd say the first reason is that it's been able to very quickly demonstrate very meaningful results. So the way that you typically approach behavioral economics is that you have kind of two key elements to it. You have a conceptual framework that you're working with, which is all of the decades of research around what's effective in influencing people's behavior. But then the second, and I think the most important component, is that you apply experimental approaches and you actually test these concepts. But you test them in the real world with your own customers to see what's effective in shifting people's behavior. So that's a big part of what has become a reason why more and more businesses are taking this up. But I think the second reason is that it's really kind of the nature of the interventions that you can apply that make it more likely to make you succeed. What you tend to do when you're applying behavioral economics, you're looking at influencing an end behavior. So that might be something like trying to encourage people to take up a product that you're selling, or to retain a customer, or to encourage people to keep their retirement savings with you. But what you do with behavioral economics is that you look at the existing systems and processes that you have in place, and you look at where you can make small tweaks or adjustments to those processes. So what you do is you make those adjustments and you test them to see if they're effective. And I think what's interesting about that is that they're very low cost and low risk adjustments that you're making. You're not having to do an enormous amount of research. You're not having to build entirely new systems. You're just working with what's there and making it more effective. And I think probably the third reason is that there are an endless number of applications for this type of work. So it's probably more obvious in a very kind of customer-centric type of business where you're trying to influence the behavior of your customers in terms of things like trying to increase your sales or retain those customers. But I think it also applies to other businesses where you're not as customer-centric. So say, for example, you're building infrastructure, you're building a bridge. Ultimately, it's people who are doing that. So even for your own internal operations, your own organizational development, there are insights that can be applied from behavioral economics to influence the people working in your organization.
To hire the right people.
Hire the right people, to make sure that they're performing so that your performance management systems are aligned with the latest insights from behavioral economics, but also things like adhering to health and safety standards. You can make sure that that's more likely to be happening just in the way that you design. So if you're designing around the humans in your organization and the customers that you're interfacing with, you're much more likely to be successful, because if those behaviors that you're aiming to influence are the things that are aligned with your end kind of commercial objectives, you're going to be more successful.